Today, we'll be recapping my most recent solo trip to Walt Disney World, which I just got back from 2 days ago. We'll go over the highlights and some fun tips and tricks that you can apply to your vacation. Hello and welcome to the Let's Go to Disney podcast. I'm Oliver.
And I'm Lucy.
Today is Sunday, February 9th, and you're listening to episode 74, February 2025 Trip Recap. Before we get into today's main topic, here's what's going on in the parks right now.
So it's been a couple of weeks since we've covered news, since we recorded so early in the week before Oliver's trip, so we've got a couple of things to catch up on. First up, we finally learned the fate of the Galactic Star Cruiser. If you recall, that was the highly expensive cruise-like experience that was at Walt Disney World for a very short time before it had its final voyage. They reported that the space will now be used as office space for Walt Disney Imagineering, and guests will no longer have access to the space at all. I think that's still a good use of space then. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's too bad that, that it
your
average person is not going to be able to see it, but it is
it'll be a fun work environment.
Yeah, for Imagineers, it's going to be awesome to work there. Absolutely.
Everything Pop Shopping and Dining is finally completely done. This is the combined merchandise and quick service location at Disney's Pop Century Resort. All of the walls have come down, the store is fully open, the new dining room has refreshed colors and bright color accents that make the whole space very pretty and inviting. Oliver was actually able to walk through this space on his trip, and he can confirm it looks really good there.
Can confirm it does look good, yep.
We got an official closing date for It's Tough to Be a Bug. So its official closing date will be March 17th, meaning the last day to catch the show will be March 16th. Reminder that the new show that's going to be taking over the space will be Zootopia Better Zoogether. And it's set to open in the winter of 2025. So soon, because we're still in the winter of 2025.
Yeah, I don't know. We're getting into spring here soon.
Yeah, so who knows at this point? We're going to let you know, though, when we know. Jelly Rolls on the Disney's Boardwalk will be closing after 30 years. The Dueling Pianos bar shared in an Instagram post that they will be likely making a move, and while they haven't said where they're going to be moving to, we are assuming it's going to be off of Walt Disney World property. We don't have an official closing date as of yet, but it likely will be this spring. We'll announce it here once we get more concrete details. Over at Universal Orlando, Mardi Gras has begun, and you can experience it through to March 30th of 2025. This is their 30th year doing the celebration. There are several food booths to experience, as well as a parade and the Mardi Gras concert series, which includes stars like Joe Jonas, T-Pain, TLC, Foster the People, All Time Low, among others. In Disney Cruise Line news, the Dine and Play option is returning as an option for families sailing on a Disney cruise. Guests will be asked as they arrive for their dining to see if they are participating, and then they will be instructed to have their kids report to the cast members at the front of the restaurant around 9 o'clock, leaving the adults to enjoy the rest of the meal while the kids go off and play. This is only available for the second dining, which starts at 8:15 p.m.
Yeah, that's something that Disney Cruise Line used to do. And essentially what it allows you to do is that if you have late dining, meaning that usually starts at 8:15, your kids will usually be done eating much before you, right?
Yes.
So essentially they have 45 minutes. After that, they're going to go to the front of the restaurant. Cast members are going to take them to the kids clubs that can be Oceaneer or Edge, depending how old they are. And then they're going to play while you finish eating and enjoy your meal at your own pace.
Sounds
which
like
is
a
awesome.
good plan.
Not something that we're going to take advantage of because we got early dining for our cruise coming up in November. But it's nice to know that that's an option if you happen to have late dining and you have kids that are that age. So with that said, today we'll be recapping my most recent solo trip down to Walt Disney World, which I just got back from Friday night. And reality hit me in a big way too, because it's ultra cold here right now, and it's going to be holding steady in the minus 20s and 30s for the next week. For our American friends, in Fahrenheit, that's in the minus 4 to minus 22 range. That's a stark difference from the weather I just left in Orlando, and it was in the mid 70s to low 80s all week. A little cooler in the mornings and evenings and no rain. It was the perfect weather actually on this trip. Actually, really, really good weather. So I was super, super pleased with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so jealous Oliver got to do this trip because it was super cold here all of last week while he was gone as well. And it was super busy for me, just handling the household and stuff. But overall, it went really well, except for one big caveat here. On Thursday afternoon, when I was on my way to pick up the kids from school, I was rear-ended at a stop sign. I'm okay, and really, It was just a pretty minor cosmetic damage to our rear bumper, all things considered, but it was minus 30 that day, so the plastic bumper just completely got crushed. I think if it had been summer, it may have just been like a scratch.
Not
really.
As bad, yeah.
But the lady that hit me was very courteous, though, which I appreciated, and we've already reached out to Saskatchewan Insurance Company, SGI for short, and the lady actually took responsibility for the collision, so it's a fairly easy process for us to get our vehicle fixed, and it's not going to cost us anything at all, so thank God for insurance. Having said that, though, it's actually our second one in less than a year. So last March of 2024, I was cut off big time and had to take an evasive action and ended up hitting a traffic sign to avoid the collision. The driver in that one did not admit fault, but there was actually a wonderful witness who thankfully saw it happen, and they gave me his information, and he was actually able to corroborate the entire story. So long story short, we weren't on the hook for that one either. I'm not a bad driver, I swear. I've just had bad luck in the last year with people who aren't comfortable driving in this weather.
100%. And I feel terrible that this happened, obviously, while I was gone. The timing is obviously not ideal. But I mean, there's never an ideal time to get in a collision. But I'm home now and we'll be dealing with getting it appraised and fixed here in the coming weeks. Aside from that, the basement renovation is coming along really well. The walls have been taped, mudded, and sanded, and the primer is almost done. Our contractor told us that by the end of this week, he'll have an exact end date for the project. We've had a general kind of floating 8 to 10 week timeline up until now, but we'll get something concrete here soon, which is really, really exciting.
Absolutely. And we've got a really good idea of how everything will be set up down there. And so we're going to be shopping for new couches, shelving, and then the odds and ends in the next coming weeks, which is actually really exciting.
Yeah, agreed 100%. All right, with that said, let's dive into the recap. So we talked about this leading up to the trip, but I flew out direct from Regina to Orlando International last Friday, which was the 31st. I landed at MCO just after 1:30 local time. And as you guys know, I always carry on, and we're also Nexus card holders, so getting off the plane and going through customs was a breeze. I hailed an Uber and I was at Art of Automation by 20 to 3. So basically just over an hour from wheels down to walking into the lobby of the resort, which is awesome. One thing to keep in mind is depending on where you're flying in from, and if you have checked luggage, your mileage may vary here in terms of like how much time it takes you to get from the airport to your resort. If you're coming from somewhere outside of the US, you're going to have to clear customs, right? Unless you've done that in your country. So for example, I flew direct and there's no US customs agents in Regina. It's just too small. But usually we connect via Calgary or Toronto. And when we do, we actually clear customs before we board the flight to the US. So that's really convenient as well, because once we land in Orlando, we just go. Either way, if you're international, you're going to have to clear customs at some point. It's just a matter of where. But anyways, like I said, I was at Art of Automation before 3 p.m. I stopped at Ink and Paint Shop, which is their merchandise location at the resort, and I picked up a customary refrigerator magnet.
Yeah, we always buy a magnet when we stay at a resort just to commemorate the resort and the stay itself. It's actually a pretty inexpensive way of having a little souvenir from each trip. We might get a Christmas decoration here and there, but we really don't buy a lot. Especially if it's just you and I, we might get our kids a little bit more. But yeah, we really like the magnets.
Yeah, the only thing I bought outside of magnets on this trip was a Spear jersey.
Yeah.
And it's like that all blacked
out
one.
It's the one you wanted for a while.
Yeah, so it's a black Spear jersey with black lettering. And it's like just slightly different. Yeah. So you can actually see it. But I love it. It's very subdued. It looks sleek. Yeah, exactly. So like I said, my room was ready. I got a text notification, an email, and a push notification, all from Disney when that happened.
Yeah, and just a couple of things to note here is that if your room isn't ready when you arrive, don't worry. You will be notified as soon as it is. And if you want to head into the parks or Disney Springs, or you just want to explore the resort without carrying your luggage, you can always just check your bag with Bell Services and then go do whatever from there. Also, another perk for Disney Resort guests that just came into effect in 2025 is that you actually have access to whichever Disney water park is open at the time of your visit. So since the pandemic closures, only one water park is open at a time, so either Blizzard Beach or Typhoon Lagoon. But if you arrive early enough in the day to head there, you definitely have this as an option. So just make sure you have your swimsuit accessible when you're packing. And then also note that the water parks tend to close early at this time of year. So for example, Blizzard Beach is open from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. today. So just something to be mindful there. You can find the opening times in the same places as the other parks on the My Disney Experience app.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't take advantage of this because I would have only had an hour or so in the park, and I wanted to head into EPCOT anyway. So from there, I went and checked out the room. I was staying in the Little Mermaid area of the resort. It's the area that is furthest away from the main lobby. The other areas, so the Finding Nemo, Lion King, and Cars areas, are all a little closer or right near the main lobby. Incidentally, those are all the family suite rooms. The standard rooms are all located in the Little Mermaid area.
Yeah, and I honestly think that that's probably one of the biggest gripes we hear that people have about the Little Mermaid area is that the rooms are just so far from everything.
Yeah, it's true. And, this may be an unpopular opinion, but here's my take. It's not that far. Okay, now I want to be careful when I say that because I realize, some people are traveling with young kids or elder family members, or maybe you just simply have, mobility concerns where that extra distance may be problematic. So if that's you, I get it 100%. And yes, that walk can be a little bit cumbersome. But I'd say for most folks with kids in the, like the 3 to 4 years old or older range, especially if you're traveling with a stroller, the walk is really not a big deal. It's not close, but it's really not that far. I walked fast and it took me maybe 5 minutes. So for the average person, I'd say under 10 minutes or so for sure. But I digress. So the room itself was perfect. I was in a king bedroom, which was fine since I was alone. The room is pretty bare bones. There was a small table with 2 chairs, a TV, and the washroom with the tub shower combo. There was no fridge, and the coffee maker was a small kind of single serve machine. Now, if you're the type of person who's going to spend very little time in your room, like me, this is the perfect setup. If you're staying here with a family of 4, for example, it's got everything you need. But to have more creature comforts, you do need to step it up to the moderate resorts or higher tier, right? So that's something to keep in mind there. From there, I changed into shorts because it was a hot afternoon and I walked to the Skyliner. Again, that's about a 5-minute walk or so. It's about the same distance from the lobby, but not quite in the same direction. There was no light up at the Skyliner when I got there, and I was getting on at just about 3:15.
So another thing we want to mention quickly, because it's something I know can be very confusing to those who have never or aren't used to taking the Skyliner. The Skyliner has a main hub and then 3 lines leading out from there. The main hub for the entire Skyliner system is actually located at the Caribbean Beach Resort. And then from there, the 3 lines are the line from Caribbean Beach to the Art of Animation and Pop Century Resorts, which share that Skyliner station. Then the line from Caribbean Beach to Hollywood Studios. And then lastly, the line from Caribbean Beach to EPCOT, which has a rolling stop at the Riviera Resort. So long story short, if you are leaving from anywhere other than Caribbean Beach to get to a park, you will have to transfer at Caribbean Beach at some point. So for example, if you are coming from Art of Animation to get to EPCOT or Hollywood Studios, you'll have to get off at Caribbean Beach and then board the proper line to whichever park you are trying to get to. And if you are coming from EPCOT to get to Hollywood Studios, you would have to get off at Caribbean Beach and then board the Hollywood Studios line. The only small caveat to this is, since the Riviera stop is located on the EPCOT line, guests getting on at Riviera traveling to EPCOT have just a straight shot to that park. But if they are getting on at Riviera to get to Hollywood Studios, they will have to still switch lines to get there. And again, that's at the Caribbean Beach main hub. So long story short, 3 lines, all that lead to the hub, which is the Caribbean Beach Resort.
Yeah, exactly. Good point. So once I got to EPCOT, I went and visited a couple of the food booths for the Festival of the Arts. I wanted to get an early jump on the wonderful Walk of Colorful Cuisine since I was doing it alone and I wouldn't be splitting the snacks with Lucy. So I went to Vibrante and Vivito. That was the first booth I hit up. And I had the chorizo and potato empanada, which was a wonderful walk item. This was good, not great. I gave it a 7 out of 10. I also got the passion fruit-filled mango cheesecake here, which was amazing. I gave that one a 10 out of 10. I also stopped at the artist table at the American Adventure Pavilion and had the deviled egg trio, and these were really good. I enjoyed these quite a bit. After that, I made my way to the Creation Shop to pick up my annual pass holder magnet. These things are elusive, you guys. This is actually the first time that one of our trips lines up with them being available. When they do come out, they're only usually for a few weeks at a time. So if you're not there when they're available, you're not getting one. Finally, this trip landed right in the middle of an availability window. And the ironic part is I've seen what they've looked like in recent years because Disney parks will always share a look at what they look like on their socials. And this is probably my least favorite one.
Yeah, it's pretty ugly.
It's Ray from Princess of the Frog, and it just isn't my favorite. But it's quote unquote free, right? I say free in quotes because like your annual pass is like $1,500.
Yeah.
But I wasn't not going to get it, right? So it's on the fridge now with our other Disney magnets. Now, I had a Lightning Lane pass for Guardians between 8 and 9 p.m., but I tried to modify it for earlier since I had a later reservation at Cake Bake Shop and I wanted to catch Luminous as well. And sure enough, I was able to do it for 5 p.m. So after creations, I scanned into my single pass and rode Guardians. It's still great, by the way. And after that, I headed back towards the International Gateway entrance and I wanted to try out the single rider queue for Remy's. And as soon as I entered through the queue, I noticed it was like hugely backed up, pretty much right near the entrance. I overheard the cast members saying in French that people in the single rider queue would at that point be waiting the same time as standby if not longer, right? So the posted wait time was 65 minutes. So I got out of that queue knowing I'd be back a couple times during the week and I would be able to try again.
See, being French pays off. You were able to hear what they were saying.
Apparently, yeah. So from here, I walked out of the International Gateway entrance and went to walk around the Yacht and Beach Club resorts, just kind of exploring and around and not really there for any specific reason, right? Just taking it in. My reservation at Cake Bake Shop was for 7:30 and they sat me on the bar side, which I appreciated because
it was your first meal of the trip and you weren't sure how you were going to feel about being solo.
Exactly. Yeah. But the restaurant, you know, it was on the bar side, it was fine. And the restaurant itself is super pretty. It's very white in there. So like the walls are white, the floor is white, the bar is white, the wait staff uniforms are white, just everything is white. It looks like
crisp.
Yeah, exactly. The menu has a lot of Southern style cuisine and I was debating between the gumbo and the shrimp po' boy for dinner. And my server suggested, well, why don't you do the shrimp po' boy with a small side of gumbo? And I thought, you know what? That's a great idea. Let's do it. I fully intended on trying a cake slice for dessert, but I was just so stuffed from dinner and I knew you could get the cake slices from the attached bakery. So I opted to skip dessert and come back at some point in the trip to grab that cake slice. I left there right around 8:30 p.m. and made my way back towards the front of the World Showcase in between Canada and Mexico to catch Luminous. It was busy, but not overly so, and I was able to get a good viewing spot. It was a great show as always. Now, I know the Skyliner gets a huge line after the fireworks, so I boogied from the front of the World Showcase, and I mean like a fast walk, right?
And you are a fast walker, so when he says fast, he was basically running without running.
Well, yeah, it was it was a speed walk, right? It took me 5 minutes, which is pretty fast. I timed it from the time I left the fireworks spot that I was at to the time that I stepped onto a gondola. Total time was 18 minutes. The line was pretty small when I got there, so I didn't have to wait long. I looked back when I was taking off, and the line had grown substantially in that time. So just something to keep in mind there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely something to keep in mind if you are heading to the Skyliner after fireworks. Either watch them from closer to the International Gateway entrance, so you're close to it when they finish, or just accept that there is going to be a line.
Exactly.
You can also mosey and take your time, and then the line will die down eventually. But again, just know that right after the fireworks, this line can actually get quite long.
Yeah, exactly. So all said, my total travel time was 38 minutes. So essentially from the time I left my spot that I had for the fireworks to the time that I was stepping off at Art of Animation, that total time was 38 minutes. You could easily tack on another 20 minutes or more on top of that, just waiting to get on at EPCOT if there's a long lineup.
Yeah.
All right, the next day was Animal Kingdom for me. So I was up early because I wanted to rope drop Flight of Passage, and the park hours were from 8 to 8, which means early entry was 7:30, which means the first buses let out around 6:30, which means the first buses will arrive at the resorts close to 6 a.m., right? I was the first person in line for the buses right around 6.
That does not surprise me at all.
Yeah. But a couple of other families trickled in right after, and then a whole whack more people arrived shortly after that. The bus arrived later than usual, so right around 6:25, and it was dropping us off at Animal Kingdom right around 6:37. And I was in line at security about at 6:39. I was looking at my watch, right? I was by myself. And there was already quite a few people there from the buses that had been let out just a few minutes before us. So we were let in to go queue at the touch points right around 6:50, and I was able to speed walk and get to the front of one of those touch points. We were held there until about 7:15, and then it was the usual mad dash to Pandora, right? Cast members were waiting for us on the far side of the bridge that leads to the attraction. This is by far the most chaotic part of rope drop at Animal Kingdom, right?
Yes.
They lead the mass of people forward, but it's like a big glob. So
we're like 20 people spread apart and then all behind you.
Yeah, exactly. So while I was at close to the front, by the time you do the big hook around and they start to walk you to the queue of the attraction, I was probably 20 or 30 people back. It's not a big deal because I was still super close to the front. But it's just not orderly at all, right? Until you get shoulder to shoulder with your party. And it was even worse for me this time because normally we can walk kind of side by side and take up more space when we, it's Lucy and I or even with the kids. But people were passing me on all sides, right? Because I'm just by myself kind of in the middle. So a couple people would jump in front of me and then their whole party would join in front of them. And then I just got pushed back further and further. It's just chaos,
and I absolutely hate that one.
Which again, it's not a big deal because I knew that it doesn't matter.
You're going to get on it quickly.
I'm going to get on it in the first 5 minutes.
I just have to keep remembering that too because I hate it with the kids when I have grown adults shoving my kids out of the way.
Oh, I know.
And I just feel like raging,
for
but
sure.
I don't
because again,
we're in Disney.
No, and like you said, we all get on early, right?
But I just don't like it when people shove my kids
closest to the yeah, exactly. But everyone there that's closest to close-ish, right, to the front is going to get on pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There's really no need for that. But anyways.
So side note, I actually saw a post online that is topical, and it was basically asking, why would you rope drop? Because you'll wait an hour before opening, essentially. So you get up early and wait outside of security, then the touch point, then to enter the queue for a ride, which all amounts to about an hour or more. So why not show up later and just wait in the conventional queue? Well, the answer is because of the no waiting to ride. So if you show up later, that's fine, but all the people showing up early will be coming off in the first 15 minutes of early entry and then be able to get to another ride, maybe even 2 more rides while you wait to ride the one. So there's no really right way to do this, just different ways and what's important to you when you're kickstarting your day.
Yeah, exactly. Different strokes for different folks is what it boils down to. Anyways, as soon as I was off Flight of Passage, I walked over to Navi River Journey and it was a walk-on. I didn't wait at all. Now, our usual early entry strategy is from here, we'd head over to Kilimanjaro Safaris, which opens with the park. But I had purchased multi-pass this day since I wasn't sure if I'd be hopping in the afternoon. And I had a Kilimanjaro Safaris Lightning Lane booked for 8:55. So I made my way over to Expedition Everest instead. The wait was 5 minutes and it was basically a walk-on. It was a posted 20 when I got out and I didn't get back in line. But I can pretty much guarantee that if I had, I would have waited less than 10 minutes and probably closer to 5, right? After Everest, I grabbed a coffee from Creature Comforts, which is the Starbucks location in this park. I walked around the walking trail that passes underneath the Tree of Life on Discovery Island while I sipped my coffee and I waited for my Lightning Lane time. I then did a few back-to-back Lightning Lanes. So I did Kilimanjaro Safaris, which had a posted 25-minute wait, the Expedition Everest, which had a 40-minute posted wait, and finally Dinosaur, which had a 30-minute posted wait. After that, I grabbed another coffee from Creature Comforts while I was waiting to check in for my Wild Africa Trek tour, which was at 11:45. So I actually got an email from Disney the week before the tour with some instructions, one of which was to arrive 30 minutes before departure. So I checked in with cast members for the Trek, which is in a little hut right near the entrance to Kilimanjaro Safaris. I had to sign a waiver and wait for cast members from the Trek to come and fetch a few of us. Once they did, they brought us into an area right beside the entrance to the attraction that I have never really noticed before, but it sits right there in plain sight. On the other side of the rope, there's a wall of like vests of different sizes, and the vest is meant to tether you to the different kind of rope systems in the animal enclosures and on the suspended walking bridges around this tour, right? So they fitted me with a vest and they actually weighed me as well. You do need to be under 300 pounds to participate in the tour. This is for safety reasons, like with the ropes and whatnot. Once everyone had their vest and we're good to go, our 2 main guides that would be with us for the duration of the tour kind of did a little bit of a preamble, and then we were off from there. So speaking of which, shout out to Shannon and Dom from Wild Africa Trek because they were both so awesome. They brought us backstage, and first we walked through a trail that led us to the hippo enclosure. Here there was another cast member who normally cares for the hippos. She gave us a rundown of the hippos, their names, usual behavior, that kind of thing. They fed them heads of lettuce, but in a humane way. What I mean when I say that is that they explained that the hippos aren't forced to participate in this in any way, so that the snacks that they give are essentially on top of their regular food allotment, meaning their diet doesn't depend on them participating in the tour, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
From there, we also went to the walking bridges and we got a view from above of the hippo and the crocodile enclosures. If you've ridden Kilimanjaro Safaris before, you've likely spotted guests, right, taking part in this tour. I know I have several times.
Oh, for sure. We've seen them many times.
So I was on the other side of that finally, which was really, really fun.
Yeah, you've wanted to do that for a while, so it was good for you.
Yeah. And once we were off the bridges, we met with another cast member who told us about the crocodiles. After that, we all got into a small truck and did a version of the safari tour, but we got to go into the savannah. Given that we were in a smaller truck, we actually got to go off the regular path and get a really good, like, closer look at the animals, like the giraffes and zebras and whatnot. After that, they took us to the boma, which is a kind of large covered porch right on the savannah. Again, you can see it from the regular tour. It's right there in plain sight. They had a lunch laid out for us. The lunches were served in tiffins, which is a steel container meant to keep food cool, and it has like a couple of different layers. There was tandoori shrimp in there, small chicken chimichurri wraps, hummus with bread, little pickles and olives, mozzarella and prosciutto, and a small homemade granola bar that came from the Tiffin's kitchen, like over in the park. It was all small bites essentially, and everything was really fresh, really tasty, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
He sent me pictures, and it looked it was actually a really nice presentation too.
No, 100%, and I should share photos on the socials.
You should. I agree.
It is. It really
you should do
was
a whole like kind of reel of all your meals, and then all of like where you stayed too. That's a good idea.
Yeah, 100%. So once everyone was done eating. We took some photos before heading back out. One thing I forgot to mention is that your guides take photos of you on your tour, like kind of candid photos as you're kind of experiencing whatever you guys are doing. And then they're all included in the cost of your tour, right? So you don't have to pay anything extra for that. They give you a link essentially, and you download the PhotoFast pictures after your experience. So you're also welcome to take your own photos, but it's nice that they do that.
Especially if you're with your whole family, right? And like
and there was families of 4 or 3, and
you got some nice photos too.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, some nice photos of just me.
That's okay.
Yeah. After that, we drove around the savannah a little bit more, and then they brought us back to the entrance, and we took our vests off and everything, and said goodbye to our guides, and that was it. Would I recommend the tour? Yes, 100%.
You'd probably do it again and again.
Absolutely, I would. The guides were amazing. Getting a view of the operations at Animal Kingdom, getting some, insight from the cast members who care for the animals. Everything was just so great. I loved it. I was telling Lucy that, like she's saying, basically, I would 100% do it again with her.
Yeah, absolutely. And we would definitely take the kids too. I think they would absolutely love it. But Sophia's still a little too young because you have to actually be 8 years old to participate.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. Maybe next year. And once I was done there, I had a multi-pass Lightning Lane for Navi River Journey and a single pass for Flight of Passage, but they were an hour apart. So I was walking along the back path towards Pandora from Africa, and there was actually a Festival of the Lion King show that was just about to start. So I popped in there to kill a bit of time. If you've never seen Festival of the Lion King, we 100% recommend it. It's just so good. It's like Broadway level performances, and it's one of our favorite standing shows on all of Disney World property.
It is extremely well done. Yeah. Like the entire cast is amazing.
Yeah. Like the singing, the acrobatics, like everything was just so good. And once I got out of there, I scanned into Navi River Journey and Flight of Passage right after. I then took the bus back to Art of Animation and put on some warmer clothes because it was a little cooler that evening. When I went to get in line for the buses for Disney Springs, it was insanely busy. Not surprising given that it was getting close to dinner time and it was Saturday evening. But to their credit, they sent back-to-back buses so I didn't have to wait at all. Once I got to Disney Springs, I walked around the shops and got a keychain that looks like a cast member name tag, and it says #1 wife on it for Lucy.
Yay!
That's one of the things I did buy. And I checked in for my reservation at Homecoming, which was at 7:30. I was seated outside. Like I said, it was cooler that night, but there was those butane, kind of big butane heaters out there, right? So it was comfortable. I had the thigh-high chicken biscuits with a side of fries, and I didn't have room for dessert, unfortunately. The hummingbird cake was calling my name, but I was just too full.
I'm glad you did have those thigh-high chicken biscuits, because that's what you had wanted last time, but you didn't get it.
We ended up getting like the big, the full chicken
meal. Yeah, so I'm glad you went for that one.
Yeah, 100%. Once I was done there, I contemplated getting some Dole Whip at Swirls on the Water after walking around for a bit, but I was still too stuffed, so I just took the bus back to Art of Animation. And this was actually my last night at Art of Animation before switching to Pop Century on the other side of Hourglass Lake. I had debated dropping my bags with Bell Services and having them transferred to Pop. You can definitely do that, but I decided to just walk my bags over to Bell Services myself the following morning. I was up early for rope drop at Hollywood Studios, and I was walking with my bags over to Pop Century, and this was right around 6:20. I was passing by the Skyliner station right around 6:25, and I was shocked to see that there was already a few families in line. Reference,
I think you even took a video.
I did, yeah, because for reference, Hollywood Studios was opening at 9, which means early entry was 8:30. So these people were in line for the Skyliner more than 2 hours before early entry.
Wow, this is going to be interesting gameplay for us when we stay at Caribbean Beach in May.
And it won't be as bad. It won't be as bad because that's the hub.
Yes, you're right. Yes. Yeah. But it'll still be something we'll have to figure out.
To contend with, for sure. So I went and dropped my bags over at Pop Century and left them with Bell Services. And I came back to the Skyliner station to get in line since I had nothing else to do at that point. People started trickling in slowly but surely. And around 6:50, it was getting really busy. And there were lineups on either side of the bridge. So on both the Art of Animation side and the Pop Century side. Cast members arrived around that time as well to set up some stanchions to kind of organize the lines a little bit, and they were starting to let people on right around 7:25, so just over an hour before early entry. Since there were 2 lines, they let in people from the Pop side first, then Art of Animation, and so on, kind of like staggered in that fashion. I was right near the front, so I got on fairly quickly. I then transferred to the Hollywood Studios line at Caribbean Beach Resort, and there was no line there, so I didn't have to wait at all. I just got right on. I was getting off at Hollywood Studios just before 7:40.
And like a little side note here, don't think that you will be riding on a gondola by yourself with your family. They'll probably, I'm assuming, squish lots of families in there in the mornings, in the busy times.
And we know that just from experience. Yeah. So essentially, when the Skyliner is busy, meaning it's backed up, you will get in line or you were going to get on a gondola with a bunch of people. It's just what it is.
Yeah, like just be prepared for that.
Probably up to 7 other people,
for sure.
8 total, right? But when it's not busy, they'll put you there alone.
Oh yeah, we've been quite a few times, just the 4 of us.
Yeah, 100%. And even on this trip, I was by myself several times when it was not busy. So yeah. So anyways, like I said, I was getting off the Skyliner 740-ish. So anybody who walked from the boardwalk area resorts or anybody who came via bus was already there, right? So it was already quite busy. I flew through security and queued up like on the far right. Again, people always bunch up, right? The lines
always, they just follow suit.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. The far right was furthest away from like where you would enter past security, right? So people don't just go over there.
They don't.
I was able to kind of go over there, and I was roughly like 15 to 20 people back from the front of the touch points.
And if you know Oliver, that would have driven him nuts that he was that far behind.
But I made up that time. But anyway, so once we were let in right around 8 o'clock, I went down Sunset Boulevard and got in line for Tower of Terror. Walking quickly, I made up that time, right? And I was first in line.
Yep.
They let us in a little before 8:30. So I rode that. And when I got off there, I went straight to Rock and Roller Coaster next door. I was looking at the video I took of the queue earlier, and I was actually there at 8:34. So within we actually were let into Tower of Terror a little bit before 8:30.
And they've done that before, yeah.
Yeah, because again, 8:34, I was already over at Rock and Roller Coaster. Once I got off there, I went back up Sunset towards Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. This was right around 8:45 a.m. The posted wait was, I think, 20 minutes, and I was on in less than 5 minutes. So long story short, I was able to hit 3 heavy hitters in the first 30 minutes. So essentially during that early entry, I got 3 rides in.
Yeah, and this is just one way to do it. You could definitely have done it where you go to Slinky Dog Dash, then Toy Story Mania, and then over to Mickey and Minnie's, or Rise of the Resistance, then Smuggler's Run. Rise is quite a bit longer, though, so you do have to keep in mind, like the ride itself is quite a bit longer.
Because when you go through the whole thing,
so you do
the pre-show with Ray and BB-8, and you do like the tractor beam scene where the shuttle is like sucked into the First Order, and then the actual ride, the whole thing's probably like close to 20 minutes.
Yeah, so that does kill your early entry.
Yeah, quite a bit of it. And then I had a lighting lane for Toy Story Mania at 9:55, so I grabbed a coffee from Charlie Car Cafe, which is the Starbucks location for this park. I moseyed my way back to Toy Story Land and rode Toy Story Mania. Once I got off there, I went to Rise of the Resistance to try the single rider line. It was a posted 70-minute wait, and I was on and off in 13 minutes.
Epic.
So I was pleasantly surprised. It was the first time I was doing the single rider line over at Rise. Now, something to keep in mind, and we just kind of alluded to that, you missed that pre-show. So you missed the Ray and BB-8 pre-show and the shuttle scene where you get caught by the First Order, right? In that tractor beam. So the single rider queue spits you out in the Stormtrooper room. So you miss those first 2 elements. If this was your first trip or your first trip in a long time, I definitely would not recommend it because you do miss quite a bit. But for me, given that I've ridden it, many times and I go quite often, and not only that, but I actually had a lighting lane for later in the afternoon where I'd be able to get the ride, with a full treatment. It was a no-brainer for me. Once I was done there, I rode Star Tours, which is one of my favorites. It just doesn't get much love, right?
Yeah.
And it was a walk-on.
It's a classic. It's so good.
Yeah, I love it. After that, I had some lunch at ABC Commissary. I had a Greek salad with bread and hummus, and actually I quite enjoyed it. It was really, really good, and I was craving something green after what I'd been eating.
Yeah, for sure. It's all about balance.
Yeah, exactly. And then I grabbed a nice coffee from Charlie Car Cafe again, and I went and sat down for the 12 o'clock showing of Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular, which is another one of my favorite shows at Walt Disney World. After that, I had a few lightning lanes lined up. So I did my lightning lane for Tower of Terror, then Slinky Dog Dash, then Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, and my single pass for Rise of the Resistance. I had a good lineup of rides there in the early afternoon, which was quite nice. It was right around this time that I got a push notification that my room at Pop Century was ready. So I hopped on the Skyliner and headed there. Once I got there, I checked out the resort and the newly reopened Everything Pop Shopping and Dining that Lucy talked about in our news. The merchandise and quick service location here is all together in kind of a huge space and was recently completely refurbished, and it looks really, really good in there. The store was really well stocked, and the dining room is brightly colored, and it just feels fresh in there for sure. You can tell that it's shiny, right? It's new. Yeah. In terms of the layout of the resort, it's pretty much identical to Art of Animation.
Yeah, actually, a lesser known fact is that initially Art of Animation was going to be the second half of Pop Century, but the project was dropped for several years, and then it was revived as the current Art of Animation. While the theming is completely different, the bones of the resort are exactly the same, and you can definitely see the parallels.
Yeah, agreed 100%. I then grabbed my bags and headed to the room. I was assigned a room in the 80s section of the resort. It's not that far from the lobby and the Skyliner station, but again, if you've got mobility concerns or little kids, the walk is not insignificant. It's not a deal breaker, at least not for me, but just, it's just something to keep in mind. I found my room here to be pretty much the exact same size as the Art of Animation room, but I do have to admit, I like the layout here much better. There was a queen bed and a pull-down Murphy bed that doubled as a table, which I really appreciated. Not the bed, but the table, right? Because it was just me. But there was also a small kind of like counter/shelving unit where the small coffee maker was. And there was a cooler in this space as well, which again is a step up from Art of Animation. The bathroom was nothing to write home about, but it was clean with a shower tub combo and sliding glass doors. There was a lot of shelving around the vanity as well, which helps with organization. Not a big deal if it's just one person, but add a family in here, and that would certainly be helpful. Overall, I'd say I'd prefer the rooms at Pop Century. Actually, hands down, right? It's no contest really, but I like the theming more at Art of Animation. So where you choose to stay is going to be up to you and what's more important to you. I find that theming is a lot more fun at Art of Animation, but the rooms are definitely more functional at Pop. So you can watch YouTube videos of the room layouts, and that might help you decide where to stay if you're considering, either of these resorts.
And I do believe Art of Animation, their pools do not have a water slide, right?
None of the value resorts.
Okay, none of the value resorts. Good to know. So that's also like if your kids are like our kids, water slides are key. So
yeah. Having said that, the big blue pool at Art of Animation is still like massive.
It is big, yeah.
And it's themed to Finding Nemo, which is super fun.
Which is so fun.
Yeah. So after I was set up in the room, I took the Skyliner over to Caribbean Beach Resort, not for any particular reason, right? Just to kind of walk around, really. I sat down and had a drink at Banana Cabana, which is their pool bar, attached to Sebastian Bistro, which is their table service restaurant. After that, I walked over to the Riviera for kind of the same thing, no particular reason, just to walk around. It's a really nice area of property, and it's very walkable between these two resorts. I then took the Skyliner back to Hollywood Studios and rode Star Tours again when I got in. After that, I had a Lightning Lane at 6:15 for Rock and Roller Coaster. Then I made my way over to Sci-Fi Dine-In Theater for my 6:30 p.m. reservation. I sat with another couple.
The tables here are shaped like cars with 2 or 3 rows depending on the car, and each row can fit 2 people comfortably, no more than that, unless you have like a little between you.
Yeah, exactly.
It might sound off-putting, but you really don't notice it at all. All the cars are angled towards the front, and then there's old sci-fi movies playing on a projected screen.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're not paying attention to the people
exactly.
with you.
So essentially I was in the front and there was a young couple like right behind me. I had a burger with fries and a milkshake to go for dessert, which I took with me to Fantasmic. There were 2 showings for Fantasmic that night, one at 8 p.m. and the second one at 9:30 p.m. One thing to note is that when there's 2 shows, the second one will usually be much less crowded. So if you can hang on until then, you will be rewarded with lower crowds. And you won't have to arrive nearly as early for a good seat for that second showing. I was walking in right between 7:35 and 7:40, and the amphitheater was actually quite full already, and I was in the bleachers like way off to the right side. But in my opinion, there's really not a bad view in that theater. So no matter where you're sitting, you're going to have like a good view,
yeah,
essentially.
I agree.
The show was great as always. I love Fantasmic. And when the show ended, I was off to the right side, like I said, which actually worked in my favor because I was right near the exit. So I was out quickly and it was onto the Skyliner from there. I was back at Pop before 9 p.m.
Pretty good.
I was tired from my early morning, so I was in bed early for Magic Kingdom the next day. Magic Kingdom was opening at 9, meaning early entry was at 8:30. So I headed to the bus stop right around 6:50, and there was already 20 or so people in the Magic Kingdom bus line.
Don't you hate it when people are just with you on these things? Go away, people. Go back to bed.
The bus arrived right around 7, and we were at Magic Kingdom right around 7:20. I was through security and at the front of the touch points just before 7:30. We were let into the park around 7:50, and I went straight to Fantasyland to rope drop Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, which is our kind of usual tactic.
That's our usual go-to, yep.
While we were waiting at the rope, a little kid who's probably like 3 or 4 years old, he actually sneaked under the rope and he got loose running around Fantasyland. His dad had to like chase him down and grab him. It was good entertainment for the folks waiting, and the cast members also got a good laugh out of it as well.
Kids are the best sometimes. Yeah, they're the most entertaining things.
Cast members brought us forward to the attraction, and it was on the first ride of like the first barrels essentially of the day. I was out of there by 8:35, and right away I made my way to Peter Pan's flight, which had a posted 45-minute wait. But my actual wait was just under 25 minutes.
Yeah, so I do find that families with little kids tend to go right to Peter Pan's.
Yeah, exactly. But that wait time, and we've talked about this before on the podcast, is always inflated. It's always. Never going to be that long, usually about half.
Yep.
And I was going to head to Haunted Mansion from there, but it was temporarily closed. So I went and bought a warm cinnamon roll from Gaston's Tavern instead, which was
choice.
Delicious as always. I had a 9:25 Lightning Lane for Tiana's Bayou Adventure, so I headed there right after. The attraction was actually super quiet this early, so I requested a seat in the 4th row to avoid getting soaked, which worked.
That is key, folks.
I came off dry, so I then rode Pirates of the Caribbean with a Lightning Lane. Haunted Mansion was still down, so I headed to Tomorrowland and rode the People Mover. And Haunted Mansion was still down, so I actually decided to hop to EPCOT. Once there, I grazed at a couple of the food booths. I went to L'Art de la Cuisine Française, and I had the Brie bread bowl and the chocolate escargot, which is just shaped like an escargot and was actually not made of escargot. So just something to note there. And both were divine, like super, super tasty. I also had the avocado and coconut tart from the Morocco booth, which was just okay. It wasn't bad, right? But it was on the wonderful walk of colorful cuisine, so I did get a stamp for it. From there, I went to Remy's, and it had a posted 55-minute wait, and I ended up only waiting 18 minutes in the single rider queue, which was pretty great.
That's really good.
I then did a lightning lane for Soarin', and I also had a Guardians of the Galaxy single pass, so I did that right after. Also, since I was in the park at 1 p.m., I joined the 1 p.m. virtual queue for Guardians, and I actually got a decent boarding group. Pretty much as I was exiting Guardians for my single pass, my boarding group was called for virtual queue. So I entered the queue like pretty much right around 3:55. I waited 36 minutes to get to the first room with a pre-show and 52 minutes total. So from the time I entered the queue to the time I boarded the ride vehicle, that was 52 minutes. As a side note, in my opinion, the best two songs on this ride are September by Earth, Wind & Fire and I Ran by A Flock of Seagulls. And I got those songs back to back, which was awesome.
It was meant to be.
Yeah, exactly. I then took the monorail from EPCOT to the TTC, and I walked to the new island tower at the Polynesian from there. Once I got there, I walked around the tower and in the lobby. It's a really, really beautiful space, and it reminds me of the Riviera Resort more than any other lobby around property. It has kind of like light-colored wood floors and pillars in the lobby that are of the same color with subtle nods to Polynesian kind of theming and Moana theming as well. I joined the walk-up waitlist for Wailulu Bar and Grill, which is right in the lobby. It was a 10-minute wait, and that's about what I waited. The lounge itself has indoor and outdoor seating, and the inside is nice, but it's the outdoor seating is like definitely where you want to be, right? It's covered open-air seating with great views of Seven Seas Lagoon.
And that's where you sat?
No, I actually sat inside.
Oh, you did sit inside,
which is unfortunate. I kind of walked around outside after, and I'm like, I wish I would have sat outside because it was so much nicer. But
next
it
time.
was exactly. I had the poke bowl with teriyaki chicken, which was really tasty with lots of fresh ingredients, and I had the Dole Whip sundae for dessert, which was also delicious. After dinner, I took the monorail back to Magic Kingdom, and I was able to actually grab 3 lightning lanes. Plus, I had the experience redemption from Haunted Mansion from when it was like closed earlier in the day. It actually was down for several hours. So I went and rode Haunted Mansion with my redemption, and I did a lightning lane for Space Mountain. I was going to watch Happily Ever After at this point, which was scheduled for 8 p.m., but there was an after hours event that night, and it was absolute insanity. It was so busy with the mix-in crowd. It reminded me of like Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party. It was like just like
chaos.
Yeah, chaos everywhere. So I did my lightning lanes for Jungle Cruise and Peter Pan, and my single pass for Tron, which I had booked for 9. This was actually my first time riding Tron in the dark later in the evening, so that was really, really cool. After that, I headed to the bus stop, and it was great timing because there was a bus waiting, and I was back at Pop before 10 p.m. The next day was February 4th, and it was the day I was switching from Pop Century to Port Orleans Riverside, which was the last resort I was staying at for this trip. I had the best intentions to sleep in and head to Port Orleans mid-morning and take it easy on this day, but my body woke me up right around 6 a.m. So I got ready and packed up the last of my stuff and took an Uber over to Port Orleans Riverside. Once I got there, I jogged my bags off with Bell Services and picked up a coffee from Riverside Mill Food Court, which is their quick service location. I then headed to the bus stop and caught the bus to EPCOT. I told myself I wouldn't bother rope dropping this day, but I did end up rope dropping.
We even discussed it the night before. I said, don't rope drop, honey. Just take it easy.
Although I was further back than I usually am, right? So that is the truth of it. I was quite a bit further back because by the time I got to the park, people had already been led into the first section of rope drop near like the front of Spaceship Earth, where they scan your magic bands for early entry. I was able to make up time on the walk towards Frozen, and I was right near the front. But of course, Frozen had a delayed opening on that day, right? So by the time I made it over to France for Remy's, it already had a 45-minute wait. Now, I know from experience, if I had got it in line, it probably would have been more than likely like a 25-minute or less wait. But instead, I went to Le Hall and I had a quick bite instead. I had a ham, cheese, and bechamel croissant with a cappuccino, and it was delicious. I don't regret that decision at all. Plus, I had a lightning lane for Remy's at 9:25 anyway, so when I finished my snack, I headed there. After that, I snagged a Frozen lightning lane for 7:15, like much later, 7:15 p.m. I'd also joined the virtual queue at 7 a.m. and my boarding group was called not long after I was done at Remy's. This was for Guardians. So one thing to note is that the earlier in the day your boarding group is, the less you'll wait in the virtual queue. I mentioned earlier that I waited 52 minutes to get on Guardians, and that was mid-afternoon. When I got there early in the morning, in the early morning boarding groups, I was on and off in less than 20 minutes. When I got out of there, I had a single pass at 10:25, so I went and did my single pass for it back to back. After that, I had a lightning lane for Spaceship Earth.
Do you remember what your songs were for your back-to-back again?
I don't.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
I should have noted it down. I don't. So I remember I ran in September back-to-back because those are my favorites.
Yeah.
But I know I had Everybody Wants to Rule the World a couple times. I had Conga like once or twice. Yep. I wrote it a bunch of times on this trip. But yeah, after that, I went and did a couple of food booths. I did the Enchanted Rose, which was a milk chocolate rose with raspberry and rose center from Opening Bites, which was probably the tastiest and prettiest treat I had at the entire festival.
It was very pretty, yes.
I also had the pimento and fried green tomato grilled cheese and tomato soup from Pop Eats, which was actually like sneaky good. I loved that. I really enjoyed that combination. After that, I had actually previously booked the Behind the Seeds tour at the Land Pavilion, and I made my way there for 12:15 to check in since the tour was starting at 12:30. This is a 1-hour walking tour of the backstage area of the Land Pavilion. You get up close and personal with the fish farm and the 4 greenhouses that make up the Land Pavilion. We even got to eat some cucumber that had been harvested that morning, which I thought was pretty cool. Our guide was named Megan, and she was amazing, both funny and knowledgeable. And this was a really, really great tour. Pretty inexpensive overall when you compare it to like Keys to the Kingdom and Wild Africa Trek. And overall, it also doesn't last very long, right? It's only an hour, and I would 100% recommend it. I would do it with Lucy and the kids because I think that they would actually really like it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I would definitely do this one. And you actually only need to be 3 years old to participate in this one. So it's actually pretty good for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. So once I was done there, I had a lightning lane for Soarin', which is right next door. And then I went and did a couple of the festival offerings. So I checked out the Disney on Broadway display, which is currently housed in the new Communicore Hall. There was lots of cool costumes and props from various Disney Broadway shows in there. And I also painted a few squares on the paint by numbers mural and got the long kind of skinny sheet that shows what the mural is going to look like when it's finished. And it kind of looks like a bookmark. And I got that for my efforts. After that, I had the deconstructed key lime pie from the deconstructed dish booth, which was another wonderful walk item. After that, I made my way back to the World Showcase and grabbed the caramel popcorn from Caramel Kuche in Germany. And I got a seat for the Broadway Concert Series show, which was at 5:30. I sat down right around 4:50, so I snacked on the popcorn while I waited for the show. That night, it was Ashley Brown and Alton Fitzgerald White performing, and they were both really, really good. I loved it. They only sang like a handful of songs. The show is only 30 minutes long, but it was really, really good. Alton Fitzgerald White was Mufasa in over 4,300 Lion King performances. It is actually 4,308, if you can believe it. That's like unreal.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But anyways, he sang He Lives in You, which is from the show, like from the Lion King.
Yep.
And it's so good. And he did so great with it. I really, really enjoyed that show. After that, I was initially going to eat at Beaches and Cream and stick around for my Frozen Lightning Lane, which was at 7:15, if you remember, but I canceled both and made a reservation at 7:30 for Raglan Road at Disney Springs.
And this is where that fluidity comes in, right? Because also proof that you can snag reservations last minute too.
Yep.
That's what I love about this.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't be afraid to change plans. Sometimes things come up.
Exactly. Yeah. And so when the show was over, I took the bus back to Riverside and the timing was extremely tight.
Yes, you were pretty stressed.
Yeah. So I was leaving the World Showcase right around 6:03, right? So if you remember, the show started at 5:30. So it ended basically just after 6. And I was walking into Raglan Road at 7:28. So I barely made it. Okay. So that's a good lesson in transportation around Walt Disney World, because while 90 minutes might seem like a lot, there are no buses from Disney Springs to the parks and vice versa. So I had no time to waste. In hindsight, I probably would have been better off heading to the beach club and taking the bus to Disney Springs from there instead of going back to the front of the park, but live and learn, right? Dinner at Raglan Road was a blast. The dancing and the live band were great. I had the fish and chips, which are always amazing here. And I was going to have dessert, but again, I was stuffed from dinner. So I took the bus back to Riverside, grabbed my bag from Bell Services, and headed to my room, which I hadn't even been back to yet at that point.
It was a busy day for you.
Yeah, exactly. And the room at Riverside was great. I was in the Alligator Bayou section of the resort. The room had 2 beds and a 5th sleeper under the TV. There was a double sink and a nice shower in the bathroom, and it was a really nice room overall, and I'd definitely stay here with the kids. I love Port Orleans Riverside. It's a really nice resort as a whole. I was in building 28, which wasn't far from the main lobby, but also about halfway between the main bus stop at the lobby and the West Depot bus stop. This is important because for the parks, West Depot is the first to pick up, and it's also the first to drop off. So that actually worked out nicely because that's where I took the bus from. So I got settled in the room and again, turned in early because it was an early start again the next day. The next day was February 5th and I was back at Magic Kingdom, and I actually had reservations for the Keys to the Kingdom tour at 8 o'clock, which was actually my second tour. So my guide this time was named Christina. Last time it was Judith when Lucy and I did it last September. If you're wondering, Why did I do it again so close since doing it last time? It's because I've heard that the tour can be vastly different from guide to guide, right? And I can confirm that it was. Christina was much younger than Judith, but her Disney journey wasn't any less interesting. She was friends with no less than 13 characters in her 7 years with the company. And if you don't know what that means, I want little people, little ears here to cover your mouse ears for a second. But the cast members that play the various characters will never say that outright, right? When they refer to playing their character, they actually refer to it as being friends with that character. So Christina was friends with both Mickey and Minnie, among many others, given her height. Anyway, she was so interesting and provided lots of fun details that were different from our last tour. It wasn't any better or worse, just different, and I have loved both experiences. Last time, Jungle Cruise was down for refurbishment, so Judith actually had taken us to see Enchanted Tiki Room instead, which was great. But this time we did do Jungle Cruise instead. Riding with just kind of our tour in a boat with Christina giving us the background on the attraction on both coasts was awesome. We went backstage and into the utilidors, and there were some parallels there between the two tours. But we did see cast members practicing the cavalcade, and that was a real treat. We stopped for lunch at Columbia Harbor House just like last time, and because I was alone, I actually sat with Christina and we chatted. I learned a little bit more about her and her journey, and I told her about myself as well, so that was really nice. Overall, it's a truly phenomenal experience, and I can definitely recommend it to anyone who loves the parks and like the history as a whole and wants to get a deeper look at what kind of goes on behind the scenes, right? Get a bit of a peek behind the curtain, so to speak. So I know a lot of people worry that it's going to shatter the magic, but it's been twice for me and the magic is still intact. So make of that what you will.
And I think if anything, you appreciate Disney as a whole more because you see what is going on behind the scenes to make sure that it is magical for
100%. You see the care and attention that, you know, thousands of people.
The utilidors are really something phenomenal and of amazement.
100%. After I left the tour, I grabbed a nice coffee from Main Street Bakery, which again is the Starbucks location in the park, and I rode my Lightning Lane for Haunted Mansion. After I got off there, I went for a loop around the Liberty Bell while we still can. If you recall, that whole area is going to be reclaimed for the new Cars area coming in the next few years. And then Pirates was down at this time, and I had a lighting lane for it, so I got a redemption for that. I then headed to Fantasyland right around parade time. I grabbed some soft serve from Storybook Treats right across from Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, and I noticed that the standby queue was 50 minutes, which was the lowest it had been all day. And I was pretty sure I'd wait less than that, given that the parade was on its way to Main Street like at that exact time. So I got in line with my ice cream, and all told, I only waited 31 minutes to ride, which was awesome. After that, I did my lightning lanes for Space Mountain, Peter Pan's Flight, and Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger Spin. I got like 500,000. I have done 999,999 before, right? So I am a galactic hero, but I didn't get it on
just
this
not
one.
This time.
Yep. I used the redemption for Pirates at Haunted Mansion, again, given that it was still down. After that, it was right around dinner time, and I had reservations at Skipper Canteen for $5.50, so I made my way over there. I had the taste like chicken because it is, which is breaded chicken in a kind of like Thai chili sauce with jasmine rice and pickled coleslaw, and it was really, really good. I quite enjoyed it. My skipper was very nice to me.
Didn't make fun of you for being alone?
She didn't make fun of me, but she did make some punny jokes, so I had a good time there. I also had the kungaloosh for dessert, which is an African-inspired chocolate cake with caramelized bananas served with cashew caramel ice cream topped with coffee dust, and that was really, really good. I would definitely get that again. After that, I headed to Tomorrowland. Tron had a standby time of 65 minutes, so I intended to actually wait in the standby line and catch the fireworks right after, and then head back to Tron for a second right after because I had a lightning lane for 9 p.m. 5 minutes into that wait, though, I was able to change my single pass from 9 p.m. to 7 p.m., so I actually hopped out of line and waited a few minutes for 7 o'clock to kind of come around, and then I scanned into Tron in the lightning lane queue. After that, I grabbed the peanut butter cookie pie from Main Street Confectionery, and I went and scoped out a good spot in the hub to watch the fireworks. I ate my snack and watched Happily Ever After, and after that, I headed out of the parking, and I got lucky with the first bus out of the park back to Riverside. This was really a good day. Like, I would consider this probably like a perfect day because you know,
the only thing you didn't do was ride Tiana's Bayou Adventure because you didn't want to get wet.
Yeah, exactly. I did. I pushed that from Tiana's to Peter Pan, but whatever. I don't have regrets. We'll do it again when we go back in May. And the next day I was up early again. You can see a trend here. I'm an early riser. So I rope dropped Tower of Terror. And again, a cast member made my day here. So I was first in line. And not to call her out, but I will. Okay, so there was a lady who parked herself like right beside me. Cast members told her to line up against the curb behind this gentleman, referring to me, and she didn't budge. Time went by and more people were kind of stacking up behind me against the curb. And so finally another cast member told her to move over against the curb behind the gentleman in blue, which again was me. And she was like, which guy in blue? Which is crazy because I was like literally 3 feet away from her. And finally she was like, oh, and she moved over and she did not fool anyone, right? So a cast member kind of picked up on that and he must have felt that I was kind of annoyed. So he actually came up to me and started chatting me up and telling me some fun facts about, the attraction. And we chatted for probably a good 20 minutes. He was great, just so kind, and it totally made my day. And honestly, like, I don't even care that she was beside me.
I care. That would drive me nuts. I'd be like, lady, behind.
And, even if she was in front of me, we were all getting on that same first elevator. It's, it's Flight of Passage all over again. We were all getting on it quickly, right? So it's just the way she did it that rubbed me the wrong way.
That would absolutely irk me, and I would have said something.
Yeah,
you're nicer than I am, though.
But anyways, regardless, after the ride, I stopped and I thanked Mike. That was his name. Big shout out to Mike from Tower of Terror. Okay, he was at the front of the attraction at that point. Again, stellar dude. After that, I headed to Rock and Roller Coaster and headed to Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway from there. I wasn't as efficient as my other Hollywood Studios day. Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway had a posted 20-minute wait. That went up to like 30 minutes, like 10 seconds after I entered the queue. So I did end up waiting 21 minutes. After that, I had an early morning lightning lane for Slinky Dog Dash and Toy Story Mania right after. After that, I went into Galaxy's Edge and did the single rider queue for Rise. And I also had a Black Calf coffee from Katsaka's Kettle, which some people don't love, but I actually enjoy these quite a bit. I then had back-to-back lightning lanes for Tower of Terror and Rock and Roller Coaster. So I did those a second time. And I also had a single pass for Rise at 11:15, but it was down. I was able to snag a lightning lane for Mickey and Mickey's Runaway Railway at 11:25, but Rise was still down at this point, so I actually decided to head to EPCOT. Once I got there, I stopped at the artist's table at the American Adventure Pavilion for a second time, and I got the chicken pot pie with smoked cheddar Mornay sauce, roasted vegetables, pickled mushrooms, wasabi peas, and sherry chicken jus served open face on a flaky pie crust. And it was super, super tasty. 10 out of 10. Like, I actually love that.
Sounds amazing.
I also had the hummingbird cake, which was banana and pecan cake dipped in cream cheese icing with caramel sauce and warm pineapple compote. Also delicious. 10 out of 10. After that, I did a few rides. So I did the single rider queue for Remy's. I was able to get lightning lanes for Soarin' and Living with the Land kind of back to back while I was in there. And I had grabbed a single pass for Guardians when I bought my lightning lane 7 days before the trip. So I did that. And I actually was able to snag another spot in the virtual queue since I had hopped before 1 p.m. So after my single pass, I actually sat down at Connections Cafe for a beat. And I actually checked in for my flight because I was flying out the next day just after 3 p.m. And it was just after 3 p.m. at this point. So check-in was open. So after that, I rode Guardians again with the virtual queue. And I then took the Skyliner back to Hollywood Studios and rode Rise of the Resistance with my single pass because it was back up at this point. It was then getting near dinner time, and I had originally made reservation at Mama Rose's, but I switched that for Boatwright Dining Hall, which is the table service restaurant at Port Orleans Riverside. So I took the bus back to French Quarter, and I actually had the beignets. I had dessert before dinner on this day, don't judge me. And after that, I walked back to Riverside, freshened up, and went for dinner. I had the jambalaya here, which was actually really, really tasty, and I quite enjoyed it.
Better than my mom's?
No. No, my mother-in-law
shout out to Nana. She makes the best jambalaya.
She still makes the best jambalaya, 100%. After dinner, I walked around the whole resort, the Magnolia Bend area, the Alligator Bayou areas, just to kind of take it all in. It was a beautiful night, not too hot, not too cold. So it was a nice way to just digest and spend the last evening. I went to bed fairly early again, and when I woke up the next morning, I packed up the last of my suitcase since I was flying out that afternoon. But I had bought a single pass for Guardians to ride it one last time before flying out. I wasn't at the park super early. It was opening at 9 and my lightning lane was for 9. I got in around 8:10 and I joined the early entry folks and actually went and rope drop Frozen to try and get a ride in there. But of course, wouldn't you believe it, it didn't open with early entry. It had a delayed opening again. So I wasn't destined to ride Frozen on this trip.
Not this time, no.
So I headed over to Guardians and waited for 9 and rode it one last time. I then took the bus back to Riverside and gathered the rest of my stuff. I went and had a salad at Riverside Mill before taking the Uber back to the airport. I breezed through security and boarded no problem. We did have a small mechanical issue that delayed us for about an hour, and we had to wait on the plane before taking off, which was kind of a drag. But the rest of the flight went really well, and Lucy picked me up at the airport at 8 o'clock our time, and that was it.
Yeah, and a fun fact too for Oliver was actually 2 of his friends / coworkers were on this trip at the exact same time as him. I thought that was kind of cool.
2 of my coworkers 100% were
with their families,
literally with their families, and they left on the same day. So we all left on the 31st on that flight out, and we were all on the same flight home.
Yeah,
so we chatted a little bit at the airport and on the flight itself. So that was nice. I was alone, but I didn't feel like I was truly alone because I was also texting with them throughout the week.
You guys were keeping each other like updated on what you guys were doing.
Yeah, exactly. So that was fun. So with all that said, this was my first solo trip and I feel like I definitely got a lot done. It might not sound relaxing because I did keep busy and that's just my speed. It's kind of how I run, but I did relax some. Okay. So I walked around the parks, taking in some details I don't normally stop for. So it really was a great trip. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I did enjoy myself and I had a great time, kind of all in all.
Yeah. And do you think you would do it again?
You know, I'm not sure. I did have fun, more fun than I thought I would have. And it's my happy place. So I knew I would have some fun, but I did enjoy it quite a bit. It went well. So I'm definitely not ruling it out.
So with that being said, thank you so much for joining us today to recap Oliver's solo trip. We honestly hope that you got something out of it and learned a few things that you might be able to apply to your vacations. We talk a lot about best practices on this show, and some of the tips and tricks we mentioned, you can see we actually put into practice when we are traveling to Walt Disney World. It's really important to remember that things don't always go as planned, and sometimes plans will have to change on the fly, and that's okay. In the end, you're with your loved ones or friends or by yourself in the most magical place on earth. So take it all in and try to enjoy every minute of it if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. And as always, if you could leave us a rating and review, it would be greatly appreciated. If you choose to do so, you can leave reviews right on Apple Podcasts. And for Spotify, you can leave a rating.
You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok at letsgo.to-disney, as well as on our Facebook page, Let's Go to Disney. We share some helpful reels here, as well as some fun ones. The link tree in the show notes will take you to all of our socials.
Have a great day, and we'll see you real soon.